Lots of plug-in hybrids just don't make sense. But this is the Mazda MX-30 R-EV. And it could be one of the best plug-in hybrids ever. In this review, we're explaining why. But first, this video is supported by PodPoint, winner of our Best Home EV Charger Test 2023. Look in our description below to find out more. Before we talk about hybrids, let's talk about the MX-30. You might have heard of it already, and that's because it's been around since 2020, but so far, the only version you could buy was a fully electric one. And it was, and still is, in some respects, amazing. It's incredible inside, it's great to drive, but there were some pretty major drawbacks with that car. For a start, it had a tiny electric battery compared to other new electric cars. The capacity was 35.5 kilowatt hours, the usable capacity was 30 kilowatt hours, and the official range was just 124 miles. In fact, we did a real-world range test in perfect hot summery conditions, and that MX-30 managed to cover just 115 miles from a full charge before the battery died. A Renault Zoe, which is available for the same money, was on the same test and covered 208 miles. So on a cold day like today, you'd be doing well to get 100 miles from the car. That might be fine for some people, but it means that the fully electric MX-30 is only really recommendable for people who only ever do very short journeys. And on top of that, it's also not a very practical small EV. And the final nail in the coffin for the MX-30's mainstream appeal, at least, is the fact that it still costs £30,000, even though it's pretty compromised. So it doesn't undercut any of its rivals, and all of them can travel further on a full charge. But it's time to forget about the fully electric MX-30 because this feels like the MX-30 that we've been waiting for. It still is a Mazda MX-30 and it still has a battery, but it also has a small engine and a fuel tank. So in theory, rather than being lucky to get 100 miles in cold weather, this should have the range of a regular fuel-powered car. Problem solved? Well, it looks like the positives of the fully electric version remain. So you can see this interior looks really special, doesn't it? And it is brilliant in basically every area. Even the simple things like the driving position are absolutely spot on. There's loads of adjustment in the steering wheel and in the driver's seat. It's also very easy to keep everything in this driver display always visible, no matter where you want to have your wheel or the seat. And this infotainment system is one of the best around, largely because you have a rotary dial controller down here, which means that using it on the move is very simple, very easy, and certainly loads better than a pure touchscreen only infotainment system. It's far less distracting to use this. You also get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, although it is only wired and not wireless. Now there is another screen down here for the climate controls. Now we're not normally big fans of this kind of setup here, but Mazda has done this pretty well because yes, it's a touchscreen, but you've still got buttons on either side of it. So you can control simple things like the temperature and the fan speed, either using the screen itself or using these buttons. So it really isn't distracting in the way that lots of other touchscreen climate control setups can be. So that's fine. But the best thing about this interior is just the look and the feel. It's like an architect's office in here. There's a really plush mix of really nice materials all over the place. You've got recycled bottles for some of the door cards. You've got cork down here, and this is from the offcuts of wine stoppers. You've got repurposed denim as well, and it just all feels really nice. Yes, there are some cheaper bits lower down, but they're hard to find really, and everything is really high quality. The buttons and the switches also are really nicely damped, and even the buttons on the end of these indicator stalks here feel really plush in their action. It's just a really very nice interior to sit in. But while the front is fantastic, there are some problems in the rear. And that starts out here, because like the regular fully electric Mazda MX-30, this has rear hinged doors, which look really cool and are very unusual, but it means you can only open them if the front doors open as well. So you can see with both doors shut, if you just want to have access into the rear seats, you can't do that without opening this front door. But you can see it does open very wide, which is kind of useful. And then, even though there's no pillar separating the interior,
the gap that you're given to squeeze into the rear seats is still tiny. So you've got to push this seat forwards and then somehow haul yourself in. And then when you are back here, it is really not very spacious at all. So you can see, just like the fully electric MX-30, headroom is pretty bad. If you're 6 foot or over, then you can't sit up straight without having your head touching the roof lining. And as bad as headroom is, legroom is even worse. I've got the driver's seat in my driving position, and sat behind myself, I don't have much room at all. So headroom, legroom, it does feel very cramped. So not only is the space very limited, but it feels really cramped back here because there's not much light coming through these tiny windows, and you can't open these at all either. So it definitely is the case that there are lots of other electric cars, and certainly loads of other plug-in hybrids, which are much better when it comes to rear seat space than the MX-30. The boot also isn't great. Just like the electric version, you get 350 litres of storage, and that really isn't much at all. There's also nothing clever to point out in the boot. There's no height adjustable boot floor. There's really not much at all in the way of underfloor storage. In fact, you'd struggle to fit your charging cables back there, so you'd probably just have to leave them loose in the boot. You can, though, lower the rear seats if you do need more space, but of course to do that, you've got to open the front door, then open the rear door. They split fold 60/40. The good thing is, when they are down, the extended load bay that you have is pretty flat. But overall, this really isn't a particularly practical plug-in hybrid or electric car at all. Now, we mentioned at the start of this video that lots of plug-in hybrids don't make sense, but why is that? Because the principle of them sounds pretty good, doesn't it? You've got a car that has a pure electric range, and then when the battery's flat, you've still got a fuel-powered engine that can help you on longer journeys. But it means that you've got a car with a big, heavy battery and a big, heavy engine as well. So for a start, if you're buying a plug-in hybrid thinking that you're helping the planet, then imagine the energy that's been required to build the thing in the first place. And then, lots of plug-in hybrids don't have very long electric ranges. So take the Mazda CX-60 plug-in hybrid, for example. That has an official range of 39 miles, but in the real world, you'll actually be lucky to get 30 miles. And with all plug-in hybrids, the way that they use their electricity isn't very efficient at all. So even if you always plug in and charge at home, the miles that you cover on electric power can actually end up costing quite a bit more than you might think. And then, when the battery's flat and you're just using the petrol engine, then that is hauling around not only an entire car, but also a big, heavy, empty battery as well. So that isn't particularly efficient either. All of which means if you're buying a plug-in hybrid expecting very low running costs, then you really need to do your maths beforehand and make sure that most of your journeys are very short, and you can always keep the battery topped up, and you can always charge at home. If you do regular long journeys, then it probably is the case that a plug-in hybrid just won't suit you and will end up costing far more than you expect. But really, the main problem with the appeal of plug-in hybrids generally is just how expensive they are. So in most instances, a plug-in hybrid version of a car costs thousands of pounds more than exactly the same car, but just with a regular petrol or diesel engine.
There are, of course, some benefits though. Their low benefit in kind tax ratings make them tempting choices for company car drivers in the UK. And as we've alluded to, if your journeys are always very short and the battery is always topped up at home, then they can be cheap to run. But for the most part, especially for private buyers, plug-in hybrids have a pretty niche appeal. But this MX-30 is different. Let's explain.
The battery in this is around half the size of the one in the fully electric MX-30. At 17.8 kilowatt hours, the official range of this car is 53 miles. But as well as the battery, you also have an 830cc rotary engine under the bonnet.
This is a rather curious thing with spinning rotors in place of pistons, making it smaller, smoother and lighter than most other engines. Mazda once put rotaries in sports cars, in which they sacrificed fuel economy for performance, and it championed this tech for 60 years before retiring it in 2012. But it's back, with a very different remit from before, because unlike most other plug-in hybrids, the engine in this MX-30 never powers the wheels. It actually acts as a generator to top up the battery. That effectively means that this is just like an electric car in the way that it delivers its power, certainly, and it is very similar to the fully electric
MX-30, but there are some differences. This is 130 kilograms heavier. It's also a little bit more powerful, and it has a few more different drive modes to choose from as well to help you decide what you want to do with the battery. So you can force it into EV mode if you've got enough charge, or if the battery's flat and you want to top it up, then you can stick the car in charge mode and you can decide exactly how much charge you do want to put into the battery by using the infotainment system. And you can just leave it in normal mode where the car takes care of all that itself. And what it tends to do in normal mode is let the battery go down to around about 43%, and then it tries to maintain that state of charge there with the generator. All of that does mean that the driver display is a bit different as well from the MX-30, because you've got more things that you need to know and see. So you can see you've got how much fuel you've got left and how much charge is left in the battery, and also your predicted range as well. But really the biggest difference between this and the fully electric MX-30 on the road is the fact that you don't drive around constantly with range anxiety. Because it's got a fuel tank which you can top up just as easily as any other fuel tank, you aren't worried whether you're going to make your destination, where you might have to stop and charge, do you have enough charge left, because this is much more like a regular plug-in hybrid than a fully electric car in that sense, which is a big bonus. And it means you've got more time to enjoy all the positives that this car offers on the road, because the fully electric version of the MX-30 is really, really good to drive. This car is as well. The ride is firmer than something like an ID3, but it's still very comfortable overall, really settled whether you're in town or on the motorway, and it soaks up bumps in the road impressively as well. Now, there are other plug-in hybrids which have an even plusher ride than this, but they're all a lot more money than this MX-30. And this is also good to drive, with well-judged steering, which is light but still accurate. Perhaps though the most impressive thing about the MX-30 on the road is the overall refinement though, because it is impressively quiet in here, whether that's in town or on the motorway. And to be honest, it's a good job that the refinement is as good as it is, because while this is a very luxurious car to drive, it is not quick and it is not particularly exciting. So we mentioned that it is more powerful than the fully electric MX-30. It has 167 brake horsepower. The 0 to 62 miles an hour time of this car is 0.6 seconds quicker than the fully electric version, but at 9.1 seconds, this is still pretty pedestrian in terms of other electric car and plug-in hybrid acceleration that you can get from rivals. But the fact is, it certainly is quick enough. And wouldn't you rather have a very comfortable ride and impressive refinement rather than a pointless 0 to 60 miles an hour time? So all things considered, this is a really, really nice thing on the road. So with this feeling like such a luxurious product and clearly being a much better proposition than the fully electric MX-30, you might be thinking that this is going to be quite expensive, but it is priced exactly the same as the electric version of this car. The only difference being that the top trim in this is for some reason £50 more than the top trim in the EV. Now, we're not saying £30,000 is cheap, but this is the cheapest plug-in hybrid that you can buy.
And it should be cheap to run. It's got a good electric-only range, and if you're running it in hybrid mode, it should be decently efficient. But the official fuel economy of 282.5 miles per gallon is, like every other plug-in hybrid, ludicrously optimistic. In the real world, on a long motorway journey in normal mode, when you can't make much use of the pure electric range, expect to achieve something around the mid 40 mpgs.
This MX-30 can accept a fast charge from a CCS connector, and to get from 20 to 80% at its maximum charging speed takes around half an hour. So the maximum charging rate of 36 kilowatts, which it can accept, isn't particularly impressive, but the time it takes for a top up isn't bad compared to other plug-in hybrids. And to be honest, it's unlikely that you will be using a CCS to charge this thing. More likely, you'll be plugging it in at home. And if you do use a home wall box, then to get a 20 to 80% charge from that will take 1 hour and 30 minutes. And if you want to use a 3-pin plug, then it's 4 hours and 50 minutes for the same charge. If you do want to buy a Mazda MX-30, we would definitely go for this R-EV plug-in hybrid version over the regular fully electric car. And when it comes to trim levels, there are 3 to choose from. We would stick with entry-level Prime line. That's the model that we've got here, and it's still pretty well equipped with 18-inch alloys, climate control, adaptive cruise control, automatic windscreen wipers. It's definitely the best value choice in the lineup. It's not that much more money though to go for exclusive line, which adds things like heated front seats and keyless entry, so you might want to consider that. But the range topping trim pushes the price up a bit too far and adds things like sunroof, adaptive LED headlights and extra safety kit.
But even the entry-level MX-30 is a safe car. Standard safety equipment includes blind spot monitoring, a driver attention alert system and lane keeping assistance, while that range topping trim adds rear cross traffic assistance, which can apply the brakes if you're reversing out of your drive into the path of another car. The independent safety experts at Euro NCAP awarded the MX-30 its maximum 5-star rating. And if you are looking to buy an MX-30, they all come with a 3-year, 60,000 mile warranty, which isn't amazing, plus an 8-year, 100,000 mile warranty specifically for the battery. Mazda does have a pretty good reputation when it comes to reliability. It finished in 13th place out of 32 manufacturers in our 2023 reliability survey.
So the fully electric Mazda MX-30 is difficult to recommend. This plug-in hybrid MX-30 R-EV definitely isn't. Even though it might not be amazing in terms of practicality when it comes to rear seat space and boot space, inside, up front, it is brilliant. And it's also amazing on the road as well. Right now, it's the cheapest plug-in hybrid you can buy, and it's the best. Thanks for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there. And if you want to go to our website, whatcar.com, to read our written review of the MX-30 and to get a great deal on your next car, then click there.